Hi, and welcome to the Story Experiment. This webinar is going to be a little bit different than some of the previous ones that I've done, but I'm excited to share with you truly an experiment today. You may have to be a little patient with us as we also experiment with technology, but really excited to have you join us today. To give you a little bit of background on this experiment that I'm calling Connect4, I'll tell you, about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, I started to be really impressed with the idea that everybody has an amazing story to tell, and yet so few people have an opportunity to share their story. And you might be thinking like, well, I don't have a very interesting story to tell. My life is pretty boring. And yet I would bet like if we really looked at your life and we sat down, we had a chance to talk, you have been through some sort of challenge. You have been through some sort of um, amazing experience. And maybe you might say, oh, well, it's nothing compared to someone else, but we really don't do ourselves much of a favor by comparing our stories. Each and every one of us, I truly believe, has an amazing story. And maybe it's just a piece of your story. Maybe it's the big picture of everything that you've been through. So I was impressed with this idea. Everybody has a story to tell. And I really particularly thought about women, no offense to the men who are listening. But I thought, like as women, we kind of tend to downplay our story, and we don't have a lot of places that we are able to share our stories. So I started thinking, how could I do this? And maybe, it's a website or a blog or this and that. And eventually I came around to this idea that I call Connect4. And last year in November or December, I contacted a few of my friends and said, hey, would you be willing to participate in an experiment with me? It's called Connect4. There's going to be 4 of us women who connect on a call 4 different times, and each time we answer a different question about ourselves and share a piece of our story. So I had some great friends who were willing to try this out with me, and it's grown to, there's been, I think, 4 Connect4 groups now that have started. A couple have finished and some are still going on, and we have some more that are starting up. And it's turned out to be a really special place to connect with each other, maybe people that we knew a little bit, but we don't know that well, or some people join the Connect4 group who have never met before. And it just is an opportunity for us to share a little bit about ourselves, learn about each other, and ultimately there's power in connecting, in sharing our story, and in just having our story witnessed. The purpose of Connect4 isn't to solve any problems or provide any answers or coach each other. It's really, truly just to listen and to be a witness to each other's stories. So today I'm really excited to introduce this idea of Connect4 on this webinar. And my guest today is Amber Noel. And if some of you are expecting Connie Cole, she was originally going to be my guest today, and due to some things out of our control, she wasn't able to make it. So I really want to thank Amber for stepping in and being my guest today. So Amber is an author, she's a speaker, she's a coach, she's a graphic designer. And Amber and I have a long history in that we met as teenagers in high school and didn't know each other that well then, but probably about 1.5 years ago or so, I noticed that Amber had designed a new website for her work, and I was just blown away by her website. I loved it, and I loved just everything about it, how it was designed. And when I saw that she designed it herself, I reached out to her and I'm like, Amber, we have to talk. I want to redesign my website and I want you to do it. So after about 2 decades, we reconnected, and it has been such a privilege to reconnect with Amber to learn more about her story. And Amber describes her purpose as connecting and inspiring others to persevere. And I think as you hear pieces of her story, you'll understand where this purpose comes from, as Amber has truly persevered through some amazing times in her life. So, Amber has agreed to share pieces of her story, and I'm going to ask her the questions that we talk about during our Connect4 calls. And so, I'm going to attempt now to bring Amber up on video. And so if you will bear with me just briefly, we'll see if I can get the technology figured out. All right. Hi, Amber.
Hi, Lisa.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And um, hopefully, if those of you who are attending, if you can't see both of us right now, feel free to just send me a note in the chat, and I'll do my best to fix it. But hopefully, you can see both of us. And Amber, you were part of the very first Connect4 group, so it's really special that you can be my guest on the webinar today as well. And along the way, I'd invite you to share, any reflections or insights that you've had on the experience of being part of a Connect4 group as well. But we're going to get started, and when we do these Connect4 calls, we use Zoom, and we're mostly on video. Some of us just call in by phone, so some of it's face-to-face, some of it's just voice-to-voice. It works either way. And the first question that we talk about is, who are you? And this is a really big, broad question. And so we set a timer and we give each person 10 minutes to share, who are you? And it's really just about sharing a piece of your story, and you can share any piece of your story. So Amber, I'm going to turn the time over to you, and I'm going to set a timer so you'll hear it go off somewhere along the way, like you do just in our calls. But thank you again so much for joining me, and tell us, who are you?
Well, it's crazy. You're right. It is such a broad question. And I think typically when people are asked that question, they think about, well, what do I do? So for me and, any of the other women on the call, your first immediate answer is, I'm a mom, if you're a mom. And I think, that sums up a lot of who I am. I've been a mom for almost 21 years, which seems like a really long time. But I'm also a published author, I'm a business owner, and all of those things kind of describe what I do. Um, and I think it's interesting when you meet people and they tell you what they do versus who they are. And so, if I would dig a little deeper and really answer who I am, I think that revolves more around my experiences and things that I've lived through, things I've been through. Because I think our experiences are what really shapes us into who we are. Um, so, part of my story starts out a long, long time ago. And my parents divorced, and lived with my mom, and she kind of went down a pretty rough path. She has her own history and just wasn't in a good place mentally. And now I kind of ended up along for the ride, you could say. Um, by the time I was 12, I did a lot of taking care of my mom. So, there was a period of my life, especially around that time when you're kind of turning into a teenager and, you need a mom. I kind of filled the mom role for my mom. By the time I guess I was about 12, my mom's boyfriend kidnapped me. And I ended up locked in a shed down in West Virginia for period of about a week. Um, so, you can imagine, I didn't know if I was going to get out. I didn't know, I was sure that I'd never see anyone again. That was kind of the end of everything. And quite frankly, as scared as I was, I didn't really want to be here anymore anyway. I didn't want to go back to where I was. Um, but through absolutely a miracle of God, I did, and I did end up back home. And I think that really started to kind of develop who I was. And I was worthless, and I was shameful. I was an embarrassment. My mom did not welcome me back with open arms when I came back through all that. And I started my own very dark downward spiral, and really started to shape who I was. I made a lot of poor decisions along the way. And, it's interesting because some of my greatest blessings have truly come from, um, some of these greatest quote unquote mistakes. So I ended up being a mom. I'm skipping ahead through a lot of crazy stuff, but ended up being a mom when I was 17. And then I was a mom again by the time I was 20. Um, so, that in itself kind of rocked my world in a lot of ways. But it started to really develop my character. And, part of who I am really wouldn't be what it is today if I hadn't experienced all of those things. Um, so I think I'm finally at a point in my life where I'm truly grateful. For every one of those experiences. Not only because it's taken a long time, but it's helped to really shape me into being on a path of the person that I really want to be. Um, but it's also enabled me to connect with other people on a deeper level, and inspire them and help them, and to know that there's always hope no matter what you've been through, whether it's a million times worse than anything I've been through, whether it's you would think it's nothing, compared to me. It doesn't really matter. Your experience is relative to what you've been through. And so I'm really, as odd as it sounds, I'm really not only grateful, but I'm kind of excited, if that's even the right word. But I'm kind of excited to be where I am at this point in my life, to be able to share my story, um, and to be able to not be ashamed anymore, not be scared anymore, and that's huge. That's really huge for me. So that's kind of sums up where I am, who I am. So that's about it. But I will say, during this whole Connect4 experiment that we did together, Lisa, and with the two other ladies, was it was really cool because I've shared my story over and over again. Yet being on the phone with three other people that are intently listening and not intending to give feedback or fix anything. I found myself really emotional, and being able to kind of reach a different part of quote unquote who I am, that I wasn't expecting. So I think that was a really cool, unexpected takeaway from this whole Connect4 experience. So it was cool.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Mhm.
Um, and you know what you just shared about you know being able to share a part of yourself when you have people listening and knowing they're not trying to fix or anything. I think that's the power, that um, that sharing our story and just being witnessed, um, like, has the potential for. And so thank you so much for sharing
Mhm.
that, and for sharing just a piece of your story. I'm going to give a spoiler alert and say that Amber's written a book, and she tells a lot more of her story in that book. And Amber will share a little bit more about that before we're finished. But um, there's so much that's amazing that's happened in your life, and Um, just your willingness to step into personal growth and development through all of it is really inspirational, and the ability to persevere like you want to inspire others to do.
Thank you.
I received some feedback that your video, unfortunately, is not coming through to the panelist. So I'm going to try one more thing before I ask you the next question. Um, see if it makes a difference. All right. Well, if Amber's video is not coming through still, my apologies. Again, we go back to the name. I named this a story experiment on purpose. So I'm going to leave your picture up, Amber. Um, and let's jump to the next question in our Connect4 questions, which is, what are you most proud of in your life?
Well, again, as most moms would probably revert back to, it's being a mom. Um, and I'd have to say, as much as that's like the typical answer, I really am proud of being a mom. I wish there are things that I could go back and do differently, as most moms again would probably say the same thing. But I think outside of being a mom, which I think is what defines so many of us, is what we are to other people. I think probably the thing I'm most proud of is really comes from about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even a little longer, when I was really at the lowest point of my life. I was um, I struggle with pretty severe depression um, at times, and I quite frankly didn't want to be here any longer. And um, I, through a series of events and experiences, decided, you know, I do want to be here. I want to be here for my kids. I want to be here for the people who have suffered some of the same things and that are still suffering, and they don't have hope. They don't have resources. They don't have someone to just listen to them. And I decided, well, if I'm going to kind of morph myself into the person that I want to be, um, I'm going to have to do some really difficult things. And I'd say the thing that I'm the most proud of is that a few years ago I decided to do that. And that all started with journaling. And I started really going real far back and deep into my past. And I just wrote everything out. Um, and it was eye opening. It's not like I didn't know everything that I had written about, but some reason I saw it in a different light, and I had some choices to make. And the choice I had was, am I going to allow my past and the bitterness and the resentment that comes with that to dictate the rest of my life? And of course, none of us want that, but what was required of me in order for that to not happen was tough. Um, it takes a lot of bravery and courage to, kind of unravel the things that you don't ever want to revisit. And so I think that really propelled me onto this journey that I'm on now. I'm very, very proud of that. And at the same time, I have to humbly say that it wasn't me necessarily. I truly feel that it's through the power and the grace of God that I've been able to do all of this. My part in it and where I can be proud is that my answer was yes. I'm willing to do it. The rest of it, I really can't take any credit for at all. Um, but I'm proud of saying yes. And I think that's something that we all have control over. We always have a choice to say yes or to say no. But at the end of the day, it's going to really dictate um, the rest of your story. You can't change the story you've already lived, but you have complete control over changing the rest of your story into what you actually want it to be. So I'm kind of proud of that.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. During our Connect4 calls, we often just take a moment just to kind of like pause and reflect after someone shared. And, like Amber, after you share that, like there is just like um, a piece of me that just wants to like, wow, like,
Hug me.
yeah, yeah. And yet like we're not in the same space, right? So like sometimes the silence and just saying thank you so much for sharing. It is sort of like a hug that we give each other in the Connect4 calls. I like that you just said that because it fits. Like that's essentially what we want to try and do. But like virtually what do we do? Sometimes we just kind of have a few moments of silence and say thank you. Thanks for sharing. And and I personally say thank you for saying yes and being willing to step into the new areas and the challenging areas um, that you have as you continue on this journey. So,
Thank you.
so our third question in the Connect4 calls is what holds you back? And this one can be a tough one. I know for myself, when I answer this question, it's like, oh, this is where it gets real, right? Like what holds me back? Um, so again, Amber, thanks for being willing to share candidly and authentically today. And I'll turn it over to you with the third question. What holds you back?
Sure. Well, yeah, this is where it starts to get very vulnerable, of course. So as odd as it sounds, I think what holds me back um, kind of is the same thing that makes me proud. And I'll explain. You know, I think that the choices that we make oftentimes um, oftentimes are made out of emotion. So we're afraid, so we make choices based off of fear. We act or don't act based off of emotions for the most part. And I think for the better part of my life, I've been kind of controlled by my emotions. And as women, for those of you on the call that are women, we're driven by emotion. We're emotional beings, and I think that's how God created us. That's a beautiful gift. Um, but I think learning how to create a balance between what your head is telling you versus what your heart is telling you is oftentimes where the challenge lies. Um, and I think, what holds me back in so many situations is that imbalance. It's the imbalance of, well, my emotions are bigger than what my brain is telling me. If my brain tells me, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, yet my emotions tell me, well, yeah, not everything. Some things, but not that. um, we tend to let, and I tend to let fear override what I know. And I think in through this journey, um, one thing that I've learned, I always talk about perseverance. That's like my word. Um, but part of perseverance um, is being persistent and having patience along the way. And um, I think, once you start to have that self awareness and understand, okay, I can take a step back and look at the situation and say, well, this is actually what's holding me back. It's fear, and for me, it's fear. And even more specifically, it's fear of being rejected. I've lived a very full life of rejection, and um, that's what holds me back. So, like I said, once you really are able to step into that space of self awareness and being able to recognize, well, this is really what's holding me back, whether it's fear or whatever it is for you. Um, I think again, reverting back to what I'm proud of, we always have a choice. Um, a choice, and that choice starts with really recognizing, um, where that imbalance is I'm following my emotions and my fears versus following what my brain is telling me. And so that's something I continue to struggle with. Um, and I hate the word struggle because usually if we're struggling, we're learning something. So I appreciate the struggle because I can be kind of a stubborn person, and sometimes it takes a struggle for me to get it. Um, but it's exciting to be able to really identify the things about yourself that really are holding you back, because anything's possible then. Um, and I'm a work in progress. I've got a long way to go. But I think if I wasn't a work in progress, I'd be bored. So again, I'm grateful for being able to recognize certain things, and I'm even more grateful for the people in my life um, that God has kind of placed there, such as yourself, Lisa. That oftentimes helps me to see things from a different perspective, and I mean that's life changing. And even on these calls when there's not a lot of dialogue back and forth, there's a lot of listening. um, I think that's so powerful, and you know that there's three other perspectives out there when they're listening to your story. And um, sometimes oddly enough it helps you to see things from a different perspective yourself. So that's again kind of a unexpected but really neat takeaway from the Connect4 that I've experienced.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think the idea of being held back by fear is one that a lot of us can resonate with.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think for those of us, that do some public speaking and, you know, talks and webinars or training, it's sometimes easy for other people to be like, oh my goodness, they must not be scared of anything. But like, I mean, you know, I've talked a little bit like when you're speaking, I know for myself when I'm speaking or doing any kind of event, I always get scared beforehand, right? I'm always,
Yeah.
and you know, you shared with me before we started the webinar, like, oh, I'm feeling scared. It's like I am too every time I do one of these webinars, right? But recognizing it, naming it, and then moving forward, um, regardless, and that's a really it's a powerful skill, I think, to develop, and and not easy to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that idea of fear holding us back, I resonate with that. And it can be fear of all different kinds of things, right? Fear of failure, fear of what people think about us, fear of, just messing up, or, not getting it right. It's all different ways that
Mm-hmm.
comes out. I like too what you said about having, the other women listening on the Connect4 calls, and just though the idea of like that gives you, that everybody has a different perspective, and then that actually gives you a new perspective, even though they're not necessarily like sharing their perspective in response to what you've shared. You're conscious of this other perspective that's out there, multiple perspectives that's out there. That's a really that's a really neat idea. Thanks for sharing that as well.
Hmm.
So, well, this brings us to the fourth question in our Connect Four series, and the fourth question is, where are you going? And so, just a little glimpse at, what are your future hopes and dreams? Where are you going?
Hmm. Well, um, that's a tough question too. These are tough questions. Um, hmm. Well, um, there's all kinds of things that I'd like to accomplish, and those are easy to list. I'd like to write another book, at least another book. I'd like to, be able to continue sharing my story and inspiring others, and just connecting with other people, and hearing them, um, more and on a bigger scale. And as time goes on, um, I think uh, I think I've been so hung up these last several years on what is my purpose. And purpose is like such a scary word for so many people. It's intimidating. I don't know what my purpose is. And, for so many years, I'm struggling like, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? What am I supposed to do? Um, and I've just kind of, in the last maybe 4 or 5 months, I don't know, something hit me and I'm like, who cares what my purpose is? Like, why am I so stuck and hung up on trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing while I'm actually doing it? Every single day, no matter, you know, what your situation is, you are always have an opportunity to fulfill a greater purpose. In my book, I tell a story of when I was pregnant in high school, and I ended up transferred to a very, how do I put it, uppity school. And no one else there was pregnant, and so you can only imagine, how cruel kids are, and what I kind of had to experience from day to day. And I tell a story of this girl who was super popular, super pretty. Everybody liked her. And during study hall, she would get up from her friends and come and sit next to me. And she wouldn't ask me questions, or, try to pry or anything like that. Sometimes she just sat there and kept me company while I was all alone. And I don't remember her name. Um, I just remember what she did for me, and how many, whatever, 20, almost 22 years later, that girl made a lasting impact on my life forever. And there's been so many times I've thought of her in situations that I'm in, and she's inspired me to reach out and help someone who, doesn't seem to deserve my help or my time. And that's been a life changer. And there's been a couple other experiences that I've had like that. And I've realized that my purpose, is exists in every single day and every single experience that I have with someone else. If I have the opportunity to impact someone on such a huge scale by doing something so little and simple, then that's what my purpose is in that day. So I think I've stopped being so hung up on what am I supposed to do, and what do I do now, and how am I going to how am I going to do this and do that and be everything that everybody needs me to be, which is so easy to get wrapped up in, kind of measuring our success based on what we've done or how much money we make or how successful our kids are. And at the end of the day, um, you have a greater purpose than all of those things, and it exists in the small things that you do, whether it's opening the door or, sometimes I'll be sitting at Panera Bread working because I get tired of working from home. And, and I'll connect with someone and they'll sit down and just start talking to me and pouring out their life story. And I sit and listen to a stranger share with me. And I always carry books with me, so I think I've given away way more than I've sold, which is okay with me. But that's where my purpose exists, is in the everyday little things. And if I can impact someone, then that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going every day. And wherever God decides to take me as a result of that, that's up to Him. Again, I think my part in all of this is saying the yes. Every day, saying the yes, being open, becoming self-aware, and being able to hear direction that we're supposed to be going in. That's where I'm going. So I didn't answer the question at all. But um, like I said, I'm going wherever I'm going that day, and that's as far as I'm thinking about. So
Thank you. I think you did answer the question, actually. I love it. I love it. And I love, thinking about the story you told of the girl in that high school who, I mean, you don't even remember her name, but you remember how she made you feel. And in essence, like, she made you feel connected, to somebody in that school where nobody was connecting with you. And it's a really powerful
hmm
example of how we can impact people, right? Like in just the little ways, like you're saying. And yeah, not getting too hung up on, oh, what's my grand purpose in the world, but what's my purpose today, right now, for the next hour, for the next 2 minutes.
right.
Who can I connect with? Who can I
Mhm.
be present with? That's yeah, it's really, really powerful. And to approach the future from that perspective.
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Takes a lot of stress and pressure off of myself because I don't have to have it all figured out. And quite frankly, even if I did, it's not going to end up how I figured it out anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, as soon as we think we have it all figured out, then life happens, right?
Yeah,
Gotta
exactly.
reinvent and say, oh, well, yeah,
Yeah.
option B, option C, whatever else, right?
Mhm.
Thanks. So there you have a little taste of what Connect4 is about. And, if you're thinking, there's no way I'd want to share my story like this, well, the good news is this is the exception where Amber has shared on this webinar. And if you're interested in exploring and maybe joining a Connect4 call, it's a much more private space where it's just 3 or 4 of us that meet together, and you're not sharing your story beyond that. So um, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to reach out to me and let me know if you would be interested in finding out more about a Connect4 group. But you have a picture now of these 4 questions, and hopefully you have just a little taste of just the power that is involved in hearing, sharing, witnessing each other's stories. Amber, just hearing your story again, and a piece of it and a little bit different perspective. um, I feel encouraged. I feel like, oh yeah, like I'm not alone in this. Like there's other people, who are going through similar things, and that connection can just really, it can energize us. It can create just a sense of, I mean, I come back to the word connection, right? Because it's like, I'm not alone in this world, right? And despite all of our technology and how, connected we are with all of the different ways of technology, we often feel super disconnected. And so Connect4 is a way to connect and to realize that, we're together in this journey by sharing our experiences with one another. We can provide encouragement for each other and for ourselves. So thank you again so much, Amber, for sharing. And Amber,
Mhm.
you and I both have alluded to your book, and Amber has offered a special promotion for the next week for those of you who have been able to join the webinar. And so I'd encourage you to jump on Amber's website to order the book for this special. And again, Amber shares so many amazing stories. And I know, Amber, like reading your book, I was like, there's so much more here. Like, like there's several other books in you and in your story. So thank thank you for sharing more of your story in your book.
You're welcome.
And I look forward to your next book, whatever, however those develop. So Um, well, we are going to conclude today's webinar, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. Our next webinar is going to be August 23, and I'll be sending out more information about that in the upcoming weeks. Looking forward to having another guest, working on scheduling. I've got some things that I'm working on. So we're just trying to bring those together logistically. So thank you so much for attending today, and I hope you have a great remainder of your day.